As an entrepreneur, you really have to have a handle on what it is that you're working on, who you're working on it for, what's the ultimate goal, when do things need to be done, what it is that you bring to the table. As any entrepreneur knows, from day to day, there's just so many different things that we have to get done, that we have to understand, that we have to prioritize, that we have to deprioritize, delegate, do ourselves. There's just a lot of moving parts as an entrepreneur. Myself, I'm a tech entrepreneur. I also work for different companies. I have clients that I work for. So I juggle many different hats. And as I've gone through this process and honed in on how can I improve my offerings, I've learned that organizing and having a great visualization board of how you're going to get the work done, what is the work that needs to be done, and just a slew of other different things that you need to really like have a handle of and communicate to both your clients, the end user, content making. How are you going to organize those things, and how are you going to put them together in a way that your brain can really like process it, act on it really quickly, and get it done? So what I want to do today is I want to take a look at a tool that I use and different boards that I set up in this visualization tool to help me track all these different aspects. Before we jump into it, I'll introduce myself and also just introduce you guys to the channel. This is the first video for the channel. Bagverse is where we're going to talk about things tech related. How do you build in tech? How do you create products in tech? Different aspects that's going on in tech. Different projects that I'm working on, different projects that we're accustomed to or that we've heard about or that we're involved in some capacity. My name is Nelson Gideon. I am a full stack engineer or engineering manager. I've worked at various different companies in different sizes. I've built out apps for different clients of different sizes. I've built my own app. I have a lot of experience, close to 15 years now, experience in the field. And, I kind of want to just use this channel to just introduce you guys in different topics, talk about tech, talk about good practices, talk about different feature sets, talk about what's happening in the space, and just talk about different skills that you can use to kind of level up and grow your career. And I'll also even use this as a sounding board to help me understand where I'm at, what I need to do next, and how I can grow in the field. Like I said, I want to use this video today to kind of just talk about different visualization boards that I've used to help me, organize myself, organize my thoughts and things of that nature. So today we're going to be taking a look at this visualization tool on the iPad. It's called Freeform. It's an app that's included with iOS now. It's a great app. I mean, there's a bunch of, sort of like open board apps that are out there. But me personally, I've really fallen in love with the Freeform app. This is no promotion right now. This is just me just saying like this app has been really helpful for me to kind of like put together my thoughts and organize them. So, without further ado, man, let's jump into the first visualization board that I use, and this is the vision board. So something that's going to be extremely vital to you as an entrepreneur, as a person that's working for a company, or you have clients, whatever capacity you're in, you're going to really need to actually have a really great handle on what it is that you're working on, what goal does it tie to, what's the status of it, and how important is it, right? So for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I work for companies. I build stuff for clients. So I have to keep a handle on all these different things that I'm working on, different projects. And this exercise and this sort of board has been really helpful for me. For me, I just call it kind of like my vision board. Some people might use vision board differently, but that's what I call it. And the reason why I call it that is because I start off with the goals. So like, what are my goals from different levels, right? Like I have personal goals. I can have, professional goals. Like what are things that I want to accomplish in a given time? And I usually look at these in halves of a year. So every 6 months. I used to be a little bit more granular, like every 3 months, but I like to bubble it up now to every 6 months, because I feel like that's better for tracking like a more like, usually that's the time that it takes to kind of like deliver something of substance. On the tech side, usually you're working on something for at least 3 to 6 months. So, that's sort of like the the time frame that I'm using now. And then, so like I said, so you have different sections in here, right? And I'll kind of I'll go through an example of a goal and like what each section would kind of like sort of map itself out as, right? So let's write down a goal here, right? So a goal this year or this quarter is to revamp Curation Lounge app, right? So we want to deploy a whole new version. We want to add different features. So that's a goal for the end of H2, right? So how I sort of like break this down into each section is that here, brainstorm sessions is where I'll start just like thinking about what are the first things that we need to do, right? So like, what is the design pattern of the new site? Features, feature lists, tech stack, deadline, and there's some other things, right? So there's like with the brainstorm session, this section will obviously always grow, and the more and more you brainstorm for a given goal, you're just kind of like doing a big dump of like what's going to be high level of importance for me to achieve this goal. And then what I do is I then now take these brainstorm sessions and I break them down into more individual tasks, right? So like what actually do I need to do, right? So this one will probably be something like, let's zoom in here. And let's say that, I number these and I'll tell you why I'll number them in a second. But let's say for this one, the first step is that we need to deploy the backend API, right? So that's one task that's obviously going to be super important. So now let's look at what the next task will be, right? So we'll number this and we'll say that the next task that we want to work on is updating of the front end libraries, right? From React. All right, so we're going to probably need some new libraries to work on the new features that are going in on the front end, right? So you get the picture there, right? So like here is where you're actually like writing down concrete tasks that you can track and like what it is that it's going to take to do that, right? So and this exercise is really helpful because right here you're stating like what it is that you need to do. What is it that I'm going to have to get done in order to actually like accomplish this goal? So the next step, and this is a really important step and something that I learned, I believe the name of this is called the Eisenhower matrix. I just call it my priority matrix. So you have your different coordinates, and then on the X and Y axis you have not important, important, urgent, non-urgent, and each one of those buckets determine like what you should be working on, right? So anything that's important and urgent, you need to do right now, right? Anything that's important but not urgent, you can schedule for a later time. Anything that's not important but urgent, you can delegate. Anything that's not important and not urgent, you eliminate. So then what I'll do here is I'll take these numbers that I numbered in here and I'll plot them out within these quadrants, right? So like we just said that both of these tasks are pretty important, so I'm going to go ahead and put 1 and 2 and due. So the moment I know that they're due, that means, hey, they're ready for work. Right? Now we're ready to start actually like working on them and tracking how we're doing on them. So what I have here is a very simple Kanban board, and the Agile development lifecycle is something that we use a whole lot. So what you want to do here is this is just basically going to give you a tracking, and you can basically see like track what you're doing on each one of these tasks, like where you're at, what's in progress, and what's done. And this just gives you a really good handle on where you're at with the project, where you're at with the goal, what needs to be done, what hasn't been done yet, and you can communicate that to yourself, a teammate, a higher up, whoever needs to know what the status is. They can come to a Kanban board and get a good understanding of where we're at, right? So if we're saying, hey, this is now ready for work, move these over to here, and then as we progress along, we'll go through and they'll be in different sections, right? So that flow is an iterative thing. So you're constantly going to be doing different brainstorms for that goal, taking those brainstorms, breaking them down into like what are the different tasks, what comes out of it, what action needs to be done, prioritizing those tasks, and then tracking the process of the tasks as you do them, right? So then I have a couple of other sections here, which is retro and messages. This is why I also name it vision board, because with retro, because I have all this information here, I'm able to do a retrospective, right? So in the tech world, you do a retrospective after you deliver the project, right? So like it's basically like your way to kind of like take a look back, see what worked, see what didn't work, see how team members feel about what we delivered, what we could do better, what we can improve upon, what we should keep doing. So I do the same thing for myself, right? So like here, I'll write down things like, hey, H1, revamp, learned new React library, good skill, right? So like things like that, like what did I get out of it? What did I learn? What can I now take? What did I do good? What I didn't do good? So this is a really good exercise just so you can, as you're producing these things and as you're going from project to project, you want to look back to see what you learned, see what you can improve upon, and see what you're getting out of each one of these, right? So then now for messages, this is a me thing, and I think that this is really powerful here. For me, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to different talks. I read a lot of articles. I try to get things out of all of this stuff that I'm consuming. So if something resonates with me, whether it be a message or a gem or whatever you want to call it, I'll write it down here and I'll track it to say like, what did I get out of that? What did that mean to me? And then also things that I even say for myself, like I have my own podcast. I do different talks with different clients and different platforms. I create content. So like I'll have my own messages that may be something that I want to get out of my head. Maybe I might want to build on top of that, or maybe I felt like that really sort of like resonated with me. So if I think of something that stood out as just like something like do it now, right? And I'll say NJLG, right? Because that's me, right? So anytime a quote kind of like stands out to me, I'll put it in here, and it's something that I'll kind of like keep with me for this board. But again, so this vision board is really helpful to track, to monitor, and just see exactly what it is that you're working on and what needs to be done. Now let's take a look at a board that I think is really pivotal in just knowing what it is that you've worked on in the past and understanding like how you implemented it, what it took to implement it, what skills you had to implement it, and what skills you learned, as well as what tools you use. So I call this board the Skills and Tools Board. I'll think of a better name down the road, but that's just what I call it. But let's take a look at it. So if we want to sit back and take a look and map out things that we've accomplished and sort of break down what went into that accomplishment, it's a really good exercise, especially if you're in the tech field as a developer, product manager, engineering manager. These projects and these features that you work on, there's multiple parts that go into it and different aspects that play a part into it. So being able to, work backwards from what was the accomplishment to, what tools did I use, what skills did I use, was this a IC project, meaning individual contributor, or was I a manager? Did I work on the product side, or was I an engineer? So these things are important to kind of like help you get a holistic view of the things that you work on. So what I have here is like it's a pretty simple diagram, pretty simple breakdown chart that kind of like breaks these things into different sections, right? So on the side we have, like I said, your different categories of engineering, product, and leadership. So these are like the different teams, right? So like which team were you a part of when you worked on or when you deployed a given feature or whatever the case may be. So there's more here, and this doesn't just apply to tech, but I'm speaking from a tech point of view, but you can use this in many different industries and whatever field you work in. So as a person that's kind of like moved up from an IC individual contributor to working with product teams to working as a manager and a staff engineer, these are the three basically like team structures that I've worked on to deliver different skill sets. To deliver different features and different products. So then we have, and I mean, hey, you can pick your own icons, but for this first column, what I'm doing here is this is the skill. So like, what is it that what skill set or what capability that you have that you use to deliver this feature, right? So we would put those in here. And then in this middle column, we would put down what are the tools. So what are things that you use to build this feature? And like I'll walk through an example of this to kind of like give you a breakdown of what this looks like. But yeah, this column will be like the different tools. And then this last column, which you see here, it spans all three buckets because this is what was delivered, right? And the reason why it spans all three buckets is because the feature itself, it can be comprised of engineering, product, and leadership, right? There's many different pieces to the puzzle here. So I'll walk through an example of something that I accomplished and like what are the tools and what were the skills that were used. Okay, so now let's walk through an example of this, right? So a project that I worked on at a company is implementing a smart search feature, right? So being able to put in a phrase, let's say you want to see all the different data that corresponds to the medical field, but you put in the word nurse, so it should bring back everything that comes back in the medical field or anything related to that, right? So this is a pretty extensive feature, and it kind of like spanned across all different aspects, all different groups here. So engineering, product, and leadership. So on the product side, I'm working with the product team to figure out like how do we actually like introduce this feature into the platform. Leadership side, I'm working with my team of engineers on scheduling the work and like how we're going to actually go about doing it. And on the engineering side, like what are the skills that it takes to build this and architect this, right? So if we work backwards, right? So let's look at the tools here, right? So this feature, it's a combination of data science models, Python, Kafka. There's many different pieces here, right? So what I would put in here are the different tools, right? So some of the things that I just named here, right? So let's say in this example I want to talk about, I'll write down Kafka, right? So that's smart streaming, right? Or topic streaming to allow for messages to be processed and delivered in real time. What else was used here? So I would say Python to deploy data science models. So this is like large language models that are going to process responses and the text inputted to allow for us to actually do the smart searching. TypeScript plus Vue.js. This is where we're actually building the front end feature and the back end, front end and back end here, to allow for the actual processing to be displayed and used on the front end for the user. There's some more here, so like you guys kind of get the idea here, right? So like these are all the different kinds of tools that I use on the engineering side to build this feature. So now if we go to product, what are some of the tools that we used here? So to scope this out, I'm familiar, and there's many tools out there that do this. You have Jira. I'm a shortcut guy. So this is just like the planning and road mapping. Right, across the product team, so we know what we're working on and what we're figuring out and what we're going to do. LogRocket, which is a really good tool to monitor activity on a website. So this is how you can see like how a feature is being used and like what the user is actually like interacting with, and maybe even see like what pitfalls they might be running into. We have some more tools here, but again, these are the different tools that we're using from the product side. And then from the engineering side, what we're using here is, I would say, again, tools like Shortcut for planning and prioritizing. We're also using tools like Notion here for architecting, scheduling. And Notion is a documentation tool, so there's a couple other things that we could do in there. But these are all the different tools that we're using that tie to this feature, right? So now let's go to the skill sets. What are the different skill sets that we're using in here, right? So at the bat, like we said on the engineering side, we're architecting, right? So that's a skill set. Let's zoom in so we have more space here. So like we said here, architecting, like the data flow, how the feature will work, right? Okay. What other skill set we're using here? We're using full stack skills because you're developing out the feature itself, right? Now this is your coding, this is your deployment. There's a lot of things that go into that. Obviously, we're also using our database modeling. How do we store the data? And then here, another piece of the biggest piece for this feature itself is large language models, natural language processing models, so data science skills. Cool. So now if we go to product, now what are the different skill sets that we're using here? So we're using things like road mapping, agile development, right? So how we're actually like creating our tickets and tracking them and scheduling them and assigning them to engineers and tracking the status of them and how well they're performing. So these are all the things that we're using there. We're also using some design here, obviously, because the product team is going to be working with the designers to like how do we like actually make this feature look on the front end. So all those are some product skills that are being flexed here. And then now if we go to leadership, this is where now we're looking at managing, right? Managing engineers, right? So how do you prioritize the work? How do we make sure that the right people are on the project? Communicating. You're going to obviously be talking from engineers to product to leadership. Don't mind the handwriting, guys. So these are some skill sets, and this breakdown right here. If you see now, you're kind of getting a whole picture of what you built, what tools you used to build it, and what skill you honed to build and deliver that ultimate feature. And this really gives you a good, like, holistic view of what it is that you're bringing, what it is that you can offer to maybe a potential client, what it is that you can build for your own platform, what it is that you can bring to a potential company. So this exercise is really useful. I think that it really helps to just like give you a great understanding of what it is that you do and what you can bring to the table and what you've worked. To wrap things up, I mean, this is a really critical board if you're in the tech space. I think in any space, really, you want to understand like how what it is that you're building is going to work. So this is the architecture diagram. Like this is where you scope out exactly what it is that you're building, what are all the different parts to it, and how they piece together. So let's take a look. This board is super important if you're an engineer or if you're working with developers and you're building out a new app or new features. You're going to have to architect whatever it is that you're building, right? You're going to have to, and we're architecting, what we're saying is that you're building out what it's going to look like. How is it going to work? What are the different sections of the app? What are the different parts of the app? How is that data going to flow? How is it going to visually look? There's just many different parts to it. And from the thing that I like about making a board here is that I can just dump everything and see it and see how they all connect. And then I would go to the vision board to actually map out what are different aspects that need to get done there, right? So we'll actually walk through my architecture for Curation Lounge 2.0, right? So right here we have data structures. So this is what the data is going to be, what are the different tables, what's going to be stored in those tables, how do they relate to one another? Is it one to many, many to one, many to many? These are different terms and ideologies that you're thinking about when you're data modeling, when you're thinking about how is the data connected and how is it going to look. Is it third-party data? Are we storing all the data? Or what are we sharing? So these are different things that we're doing there, right? And then we have another section where we're actually looking at what is it that we're changing, right? So this is how the app looks currently today. What are some sites that give me inspiration? And I'm thinking about, hey, maybe I can incorporate this type of flow or this type of feature. And then I'm mapping that to what the new flow would look like and deep diving into each piece and what's the importance of each piece and how that looks. And, this is really important when you're, working as a one-person team or a many-person team, being able to communicate this and show how we're changing things and how that flow is going to look is very important for you to understand what it is that you're building. And then here, this is new features, what are we adding here? This is a current design that we're working with a designer, and how are we going to break this down into fitting into the actual application, right? So when it comes to architecting, and then you could do things you can actually also even add stuff what are different capabilities that we want the app to be? Is it a PWA or a native app? And then how does the data flow? Right? So there's a lot of different things that you can think about and that you can incorporate into this architecture and then go deeper and really be able to take a look at it and see, okay, this is exactly what we're building and this is exactly how it's going. So these are just a few boards that I have incorporated into my organization habit and my workflow. I probably will have to do another video going into some additional boards. But I think that these three are really critical if you're building anything, whether it be for work, for clients, for yourself. These things help you get a handle on where you're at, what needs to be done, what's coming next, and just really help you visualize, which I'm a big visualization person. I have to see things so I can get a better understanding so I can digest it. So if you're like that, or even if you're not like that, these boards can really just help you zero in and focus on what needs to be done, what's on the radar, what's not on the radar, and just really map out, what it is that you bring to the table and what skill sets you can leverage and what skill sets do you need to add. So, thanks for you guys checking out this first video. Like I said, we're going to use this channel to deploy more videos like this where we're talking about tools, skill sets, tricks, hacks, just different concepts that I've learned along the way, and that hopefully, you guys can get value out of. So, please feel free to follow, and subscribe. Jump in the comments and let me know what you think about these tools and these boards. Let me know if you've been able to use them, if they've been helpful. Let me know some other boards that you guys use or different habits that you guys use to organize your work. And until the next